In 1948, a Missouri housewife named Edna kept a coffee can on the windowsill, and every nickel that landed in it went straight to the bank that held her mortgage. 11 years later, she burned the deed in the backyard while the whole street watched. Here is the part nobody tells you. Number 14 on this list was so effective that banks quietly discouraged it because it cost them a small fortune in interest. And number 3, financial advisors today charge you good money to teach what your grandparents did for free. These 20 tricks paid off houses in half the time, and most of them have been forgotten on purpose. Because here is the truth. If you knew what your grandmother knew about money, you would stop handing so much of it to the bank. Before we start, hit subscribe. Let us count down. Number 20. Egg money. Before a single chicken became a side hustle with an app, there was EGG money, and it belonged to the woman of the house alone. On farms and in town lots alike, the wife kept a small flock behind the house, and the eggs the family did not eat went to the grocer or the neighbors for a few cents a dozen. In the 1930s, a dozen eggs brought maybe 20 cents, and a good hen laid 5 or 6 eggs a week. It sounds like nothing, but that quiet trickle of coins, kept in a jar above the stove, was real money the husband never touched and the bank never saw. Women paid for shoes, school books, and doctor visits with egg money. And the careful ones did something else. They carried it down to the building and loan and put it against the house. A nickel here, a quarter there. The hens cost almost nothing to keep, scratching up bugs and kitchen scraps, and they turned a backyard into a tiny mint that ran on its own. Number 19. The pie window. Long before bake sales went viral, the smell of cooling pie on a windowsill was a business plan. A woman who could turn out a flaky crust had a product the whole town wanted, and she sold it from her own kitchen door. In the 1940s, a homemade pie went for 35 or 40 cents, and the ingredients ran maybe a dime. Apple, cherry, lemon meringue, sweet potato in the South. Word spread at church and over the back fence, and soon there were standing orders for Sunday dinners, funerals, and church socials. The smartest bakers worked it like clockwork. 10 or 12 pies on a Saturday, the kitchen hot as a furnace, children rolling scraps of dough at the table. That was $3 or $4 a week in pure profit, week after week, in years when a man might bring home 30. The pie money went into a sugar bowl, and the sugar bowl went to the mortgage. Nobody wrote it down as a business, but a business is exactly what it was. Number 18. Taking in washing and ironing. Before the laundromat and the automatic machine, clean clothes were hard, hot, miserable work, and that made them worth paying for. A woman with a washboard, a copper boiler, and a pair of strong arms could take in laundry for the better-off families across town. In the 1930s, a basket of washing brought 50 cents to $1, ironing extra, and a steady worker might do 3 or 4 households a week. The labor was brutal. Monday wash, water hauled and heated, lye soap wringing by hand, lines strung across the yard, then a full day bent over a flat iron heated on the stove. But it was cash, and it was reliable, and it asked for no storefront and no boss. Washerwomen in particular built whole household economies this way, and many a family kept its home through the Depression on the strength of other people's laundry. Every dollar earned at the wash tub was a dollar that did not have to be borrowed, and every dollar not borrowed was interest the bank never collected. Number 17. The roadside stand. When the garden gave more than a family could eat or can, the surplus went out front by the road on a plank laid across 2 crates. Tomatoes, sweet corn, green beans, melons in August, stacked in baskets with a hand-lettered sign and a coffee can for the money. Half the time there was nobody minding it at all, just the can and the honor system. and people paid. A few cents a pound, a dime a dozen for corn, and on a good summer Saturday, a busy road could move $1 or $2 an hour. The beauty of it was that the product cost nothing but seeds and sweat. Children ran the stand while the parents worked, learning to count change before they could ride a bike. What did not sell got canned that night, so nothing was lost either way. Across the country, these little stands turned a backyard plot into a cash crop. And in thrifty households, that cash crop had exactly one destination: the white frame house with the mortgage on it. Number 16. Sewing for hire, first pattern break. Here is where the real money hid in plain sight. In an age when a store-bought dress was a luxury, the woman who could sew was holding a trade in her hands. With a treadle singer in the corner of the front room, she made and mended for the whole neighborhood, hemming, taking in, letting out, turning collars, patching knees, and for the special customers, a full dress run-up from a butterick pattern and a few yards of cloth. A simple alteration brought $0.25, a made-to-measure dress a few dollars, and a skilled seamstress could keep the machine humming every evening after supper. The overhead was thread and time. Mothers taught daughters at the same machine, so the skill compounded across generations. During the Depression, this was often the difference between a family that slipped under and one that held on. The dressmaker traded her evenings for cash that came with no debt attached. And like the egg money and the pie money, it had a way of finding its quiet path down to the bank. Number 15. Scrap, rags, and salvage. Nothing left a thrifty American household as pure waste, because waste could be sold. The rag and bone trade was alive and well into the 1950s, and the ordinary families fed it. Scrap iron, copper wire, old aluminum, glass bottles. Even bones and grease all had a buyer. During the war years, scrap drives turned patriotism into pocket money, and a wagon of collected metal brought real coin. Bottles carried deposits, 2 cents apiece, and a boy who worked the ditches along a highway could turn an afternoon into $1. Newspapers were bundled and sold by the pound. Bacon grease was saved in a can and turned in. None of it was much on its own, but a household that threw nothing away and sold everything it could turned its own garbage into a small, steady stream of income. The penny-wise families understood the arithmetic that the wasteful ones missed. $1 found in the trash spends exactly the same as $1 earned at a job, and it goes against the principle just as fast. Number 14. The 13th payment, second pattern break. This is the one the banks did not advertise. Here is a trick that cost a family almost nothing and cost the bank a fortune. Instead of making 12 mortgage payments a year, the careful homeowner found a way to make 13. Some did it by paying half their monthly note every 2 weeks, which quietly added up to one extra full payment by year's end. Others simply mailed in a little extra each month, marked for principal, and watched the balance fall faster than the schedule said it should. The reason it works is brutal and beautiful. Every extra dollar aimed at the principal erases all the future interest that dollar would have carried, sometimes 3 and 4 times over across a 30-year loan. A single extra payment a year could knock years off the term and save a small fortune. The bank made its money on the long, slow drip of interest, so a family that paid ahead was money out of the bank's pocket. They never put that on a billboard. But the families who figured it out paid off houses while their neighbors were still on schedule. Number 13. Backyard honey. A single beehive in the corner of the lot was one of the closest things to free money a backyard ever produced. The bees did all the work, foraging the neighborhood's flowers, and asked for nothing but a wooden box and the occasional bit of attention. A healthy hive could yield 50 pounds of honey or more in a good year, and honey kept forever and always sold. At $0.25 or more a pound, that was real money from a corner of the yard nobody else was using. Beeswax went into candles and polish and sold on its own. In an era before everyone feared a sting, Hives sat in town backyards across America, and the honey went to neighbors, to the general store, and to the canning of fruit through the winter. The startup cost was small, and the hive paid for itself the first season. After that, it was nearly pure profit, gathered by a workforce that never asked for wages. For a family chasing a mortgage, free labor with a sweet product was hard to beat. Number 12. The Christmas Club. Before automatic savings apps, the bank itself sold discipline in a small paper book. The Christmas Club was a special account where a family deposited a fixed sum every single week, $1 or $2, and could not easily touch it until the end of the year. It sounds quaint, but it was a genius bit of psychology that worked because the money was out of reach. Millions of Americans used these clubs, along with vacation clubs and tax clubs, to force themselves to save what they could never seem to save on their own. The truly sharp households ran the same trick toward the house. They opened a club account and aimed the whole payout, not at presents, but at a lump sum against the mortgage every December. The local building and loan, the very institution that held the home loan, often ran these accounts itself. So a family could save and pay down under one roof. It was forced saving dressed up as a holiday, and it built more wealth than most modern budgets ever do. Number 11. War bonds and savings bonds. For a whole generation, the savings bond was the patriotic path to a paid-off home. During the Second World War, families poured spare cash into war bonds, buying a $25 bond for $18.75 and holding it until it matured. It was patriotism and savings braided together, sold at the post office, the workplace, and the movie theater. After the war, those bonds came due, and the disciplined household did not cash them for a car or a vacation. They carried the matured bonds straight to the lender and dropped them on the principal in one satisfying lump. Payroll savings plans kept the habit alive for decades. A few dollars skimmed from every paycheck before it was ever seen, growing quietly toward a payoff. The genius was the same as the Christmas Club. Money you never held was money you never spent. A family that bought bonds steadily for 10 years could hold a serious sum and aimed at a mortgage. That sum erased years of payments overnight. Number 10. Canning and the root cellar. Money saved is money earned, and no household saved more than the one that canned. Through the late summer, the kitchen turned into a small factory, jars boiling, the air thick with steam and vinegar and sugar. Tomatoes, beans, peaches, corn, pickles, jams, all of it put up in glass and carried down to the cool dark of the cellar. A family that canned hundreds of jars could feed itself through the entire winter on the garden's summer surplus, cutting the grocery bill to a fraction of what their neighbors paid. And here is the part that mattered for the mortgage. Money not spent at the store was money free to go somewhere else. The careful household ran a strict line in its head between what it would have spent on food and what it actually spent, and the difference went against the house. The root cellar was not just a pantry, it was a savings account you could eat. And for a generation chasing a deed, it kept the table full while the loan shrank. Number 9. Chickens and the backyard hog. Meat was the most expensive thing on any family's table, so the thriftiest household simply raised their own. A backyard flock gave eggs, and when a hen stopped laying, Sunday dinner. And in countless towns and farms, the family fattened a hog through the summer on kitchen scraps and garden waste, then butchered it when the weather turned cold. One hog could yield 200 pounds of pork, hams, bacon, chops, sausage, and lard, smoked and salted to last the winter. The feed was mostly free, scraps that would have been thrown out. The savings were enormous. A family that raised its own meat could cut one of the largest items in the household budget down to almost nothing. Children learned the hard lessons of where dinner came from, and the parents learned the sweeter lesson of the grocery money that stayed in the coffee can. Every ham hanging in the smokehouse was a grocery bill that never came due, and that uncollected bill, week after week, went toward the only thing that mattered: getting out from under the bank. Number 8. The Victory Garden. Third pattern break: the patch of dirt that paid the mortgage. During both World Wars, the government begged Americans to plant gardens, and they answered by the millions. At the peak, Victory Gardens produced a staggering share of the nation's fresh vegetables, grown in backyards, vacant lots, and strips of city dirt. But the smart families never stopped when the war ended. They had learned a permanent lesson. A patch of ground worked hard could feed a household all summer and stock the cellar for winter, all for the price of a packet of seeds. A well-tended garden might save a family hundreds of dollars a year in produce, an enormous sum when a house cost a few thousand. The work was real: dawn weeding and evening watering, but the soil asked for sweat instead of cash. And sweat was the one thing a determined family had in surplus. The vegetables that did not get eaten got canned or sold at the stand out front. There was no waste and no excuse. The garden was the engine, and the mortgage was where the savings came to rest. Number 7. Cash on the barrelhead. Here is a trick so old-fashioned it sounds radical now. They paid cash for everything, and if they could not pay cash, they did without. The wise household of the era treated debt like a hot stove. Beyond the house itself, they borrowed for nothing. A new stove, a winter coat, a set of furniture. All of it waited until the money was actually in hand, often through layaway, where the store held the item while the family paid it off a little at a time and walked out owing nothing. No interest, no finance charges, no payments dragging behind them like an anchor. That meant the entire family income, every dollar not spent on living, was free. It did not have to feed a stack of other debts first. While their neighbors fed a dozen little payments to a dozen little lenders, the cash-only family pointed that whole stream at one target: the mortgage. The discipline was hard, but it was the foundation everything else rested on. You cannot pay off a house early while quietly drowning in everything else. Number 6. The spare room. For families with a bedroom to spare, the surest money trick of all was simply renting it out. Taking in a boarder was so common in the first half of the century that whole neighborhoods ran on it. A working man, a school teacher, a young couple just starting out, all needed a clean room and a hot meal, and a family with space could provide both. The rent might be a few dollars a week, sometimes with board included for a bit more, and it landed in the household every single week like clockwork. For a great many families, that boarder's rent covered a serious chunk of the monthly mortgage note, sometimes the whole thing. Think about that. The house, in part, paid for itself. The arrangement asked for an extra plate at the table and a little lost privacy. But the math was undeniable. A spare room sitting empty earned nothing, while the same room with a paying tenant turned the home from a cost into an income. The cleverest owners lived almost free while a stranger retired their loan. Number 5. The home enterprise. Fourth pattern break: the front room that became a business. Some families did not stop at a side hustle. They turned part of the house into an actual enterprise. The front room became a little grocery, a barber shop, a beauty parlor, a radio repair bench, a sewing shop. A man good with engines fixed the neighborhood's mowers and cars in his own garage. A woman who could cut hair turned the kitchen into a salon 2 days a week. The overhead was almost nothing because the building was already lived in anyway. There was no commute, no separate rent, no second roof to keep up. Every customer who walked up the front steps was profit that a storefront downtown would have eaten alive. These home businesses were how countless families climbed, especially immigrants and the working poor who could not get a foot in the door elsewhere. And the income they threw off, free of a storefront's costs, was aimed where it counted. The house that held the business also got paid off by the business. The roof earned its own keep. Number 4. Sweat equity. Long before the term existed, Americans were building wealth with their own two hands. Families bought a cheap, half-finished or run-down house and made it whole themselves. They framed additions, hung walls, dug cellars, wired rooms, and shingled roofs on the weekends, learning as they went from library books and neighbors. A house bought rough and finished by the family cost a fraction of one bought move-in ready, and that lower price meant a smaller loan and a faster payoff. Some went further still and built from the ground up, ordering a kit house from the Sears catalog, thousands of numbered pieces delivered by rail, and raised it with their own labor and a few helping hands. Every hour swung with a hammer was a contractor's bill that never arrived, and every bill that never arrived was money that stayed in the family. The work was exhausting, stolen from evenings and Sundays. But the payoff was a home worth far more than it cost, and a mortgage small enough to kill in a hurry. They paid in sweat so they would not have to pay in interest. Number 3. Pay yourself first. Here is the secret that financial advisors now charge good money to teach, and your great-grandmother did it with a row of envelopes on the kitchen table. The system was simple and merciless. The moment the pay came in, before a single bill was touched, a fixed share was set aside and treated as untouchable. Some used labeled envelopes, one for the mortgage, one for food, one for the doctor, one for savings. When the envelope was empty, the spending stopped. There was no overdraft and no credit card to paper over the gap. The genius was in the order. Most people pay everyone else first and try to save whatever is left, which is always nothing. The thrifty household reversed it. They paid themselves and the house first, then lived on what remained. Aimed at a mortgage, a fixed slice carved off the top of every paycheck, never seen and never missed, added up to a payoff years ahead of schedule. The whole modern industry of budgeting apps is just this old envelope trick wearing a new coat. Number 2. One income banked whole. For the families who managed it, the most powerful trick of all was learning to live on one income and bank the other completely. When a second paycheck came into the house from a wife who worked, a grown child still at home, or a second job worked at night, the disciplined family did not let their spending swell to swallow it. They kept living exactly as they had on the first income alone. And the entire second income, every untouched dollar of it, went straight at the mortgage. The effect was staggering. A family that could throw a whole paycheck at the principal month after month could retire a 30-year loan in a handful of years. The trap that swallowed everyone else was lifestyle, the slow creep of spending that rises to meet whatever comes in. The families who paid off their homes early simply refused to let it. They earned like two and lived like one, and the gap between the two, aimed at the bank, set them free. It took iron discipline, but it worked every single time. Number 1. The mortgage burning. And finally, in first place, the trick that tied every other one together. They threw everything at the principal, and they did not stop until the house was theirs. This was not one technique, but a way of life, the sum of all the rest. Every windfall went to the house, the tax refund, the work bonus, the matured bond, the egg money and pie money, and rent from the spare room. The dollar found in a coat pocket. All of it pointed at one target. The family treated the mortgage not as a 30-year companion, but as an enemy to be destroyed as fast as humanly possible. They understood what the bank understood and hoped they would forget that a loan is mostly interest in the early years and that every dollar killed early kills years of interest behind it. And when the last payment finally cleared, they did something we have almost entirely lost. They held a mortgage burning. The neighbors came, the deed went into the fire in a coffee can or a backyard barrel, and a family stood around the flames, owing nothing to anyone. That was the goal of all of it. Not just a paid-off house, but the freedom that came with watching that paper burn. Look at the through line. Not one of these tricks was complicated. They were small, stubborn, and relentless. A jar of coins, a spare room, an extra payment, a refusal to borrow. The people who burned their mortgages were not richer than their neighbors. They were just more determined, aiming every loose dollar at the same target until it fell. The tools have changed, but the math has not. Pick one of these and try it this month. Then tell me in the comments which one you chose. Because your grandparents knew something the bank would love for you to forget. A paid-off house is still the closest thing to freedom most people will ever own.